time for Wednesday's hour number 2 on hashtag Daily K with your host, Peter Bint. Korean dramas, movies, even lyrics. Why is the world paying attention to Korean stories?
From classics to modern masterpieces, time to dig deep into the charms of Korean literature.
On Check It Out!
With Paul.
He comes in here every Wednesday, twirling his pen around, very close to my eyeballs.
It's not my fault. If you're going to use this theme music, I can't help myself.
You just can't stop dancing.
Can't stop dancing because I'm excited to be here every Wednesday.
The music takes over. We did miss you on the video stream last Wednesday, Paul, I must say.
Sorry about that.
You were doing something rather meaningful, though.
I had a very interesting morning. I went to the National Assembly, which is like the Parliament complex.
That's amazing. I've never been there.
Yeah, and neither had I. It was my first time. And I went to one of their seminar rooms because there was a special forum. This year, for those who don't know, was the 100th anniversary of Children's Day.
We talked about that in May, I think.
And next year is going to be the 100th anniversary of the Law for Children, which was where it was not just for children, but it basically put human rights for children at the forefront in Korea.
Wow.
And this was all thanks to Bang Jong-hwan, this amazing human being who was also a brilliant storyteller, writer, actor, and activist.
Yeah.
And so I spent 3.5 hours in this academic forum, listening to a lot of academic Korean. It was all very interesting, but just very, very difficult.
About, like, stuff for kids and their rights and things.
Looking at that history, but also looking about how Korea's been celebrating it over the past year, looking at plans for next year.
Oh, nice.
So, yes. And I also saw, in the grounds of the National Assembly, a magpie eating a persimmon.
I thought you said a person, but a persimmon. Like, okay, did they like the persimmon kind of ripe, like a hongshi?
No, it was a proper hard persimmon, and the magpie was on the tree, just pecking away and pecking away. It was very cute.
It hadn't even fallen to the floor.
No.
That's
and
amazing.
I've not seen that before. I've heard of it happening.
Well,
I've not seen a proper magpie up in the persimmon tree going tack, 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 tack.
Wow, that seems like we could just talk about that for the rest of Check It Out today. But we're not going to, right? No. We do have other things to talk about. We've also got the hashtag, of course, which is sham or test.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pick you on this.
Yeah.
Can you pronounce it properly?
What? Are you going to say shihom?
Shihom.
No, I say it sham. Like, that's what I was telling them in the opening. I think, if you want to be a stickler, you can say shihom, shihom. Like
that's what everyone says.
I say it quickly, sham.
No, it's not.
It's almost one syllable in my mind.
You've taken out the hyung. Where's the hyung gone?
That's what I was saying. I was saying you don't have to overly pronounce it. Let's get Minji in the studio from yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And then she'll be the judge. But I think, if you want to be perfect, like Paul is every Wednesday, then do it like him.
I've got to say, Denny is in the next studio along, shaking his head at Peter's terrible pronunciation.
Well,
I'm sure he'll have things to say on the rest stop.
That's because he's got a here in his surname, Hong. He's a big fan of it. But as an American, you drop the H sound in everything, don't you? Herb instead of herbs.
He can't talk back.
Doesn't make
sense. You may try to talk to Denny. He doesn't have his mic on at the moment. There's only me, and I'm not American.
He is listening, though, I'm sure. So what does that bring to mind? You didn't do the sunung in Korea.
I did not. I'm very glad I didn't, because I think it's a very difficult, very stressful test. And quite frankly, I love Korea, but Korea's education system does need some reforming. And I have to say the one thing I cannot believe is every year after the sunung, they release little bits and pieces so people can see what the test questions are. And they release excerpts from the English test. And native speakers of English look at these questions and these paragraphs you have to read. And we would probably 9 times out of 10 get the questions wrong because it's so difficult.
They are head scratchers, aren't they?
I think it's so unfair. And I understand that you want to challenge your children, but when you're using English that even native speakers would not be using, that's a bit of a problem. And I hope that kids could have a little bit of time to play. Even in high school, it's nice to be with your friends instead of having to study.
Absolutely. I mean, it's based off the American SATs, right? The SATs they have there, which are
far easier. I took a PSAT once, and it was ridiculously simple compared to the sunung. Yes.
But it's the same system in that most people are taking the test on the same day, all with the same questions, whereas the UK is completely different test depending on what A-levels you're taking, right?
But and also depending what region you're in. What you have to understand in the UK is that we have different exam boards, whereas Korea, there's just one big exam board.
For everybody, yeah. I saw some of those English questions, I think, yesterday on the internet. And it's very academic, isn't it?
It is.
It's a test you'd come across as a native speaker if you were studying a degree in that subject. So to have it for like a high school thing.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too much. And I'm always amazed that the students do so incredibly well.
I know, it's unbelievable.
So I wish everyone the best for tomorrow. Please eat sticky foods. Get your hands on some toffees. No seaweed soup for you tonight.
With the hashtag Sham, we say Sham.
Shihom. Shihom.
Shihom e Buddha, right? To stick to the test means to pass it, which is why Paul is saying eat sticky foods. We've got that kind of, what's it called, superstition here, right?
Yeah, I'd like you to eat some yacht now. Go eat some yacht, Peter.
I have some chat yacht at home, I will say that. The pine seed taffy, sticky taffy, which can also have another meaning that I'm sure we'll never learn about on Minji's Welcome to Korea. Today's book, what are we going to be taking a look at, Paul?
It's called Aloha 나의 엄마들.
Aloha.
Yes, The Picture Bride by Lee Geum-yi, translated by An Seon Jae, and it's a brilliant tribute to first-generation Korean Americans, immigrants coming to Hawaii at the start of the 20th century, suffering a lot of hardships. And it's focusing on three women in particular who take a chance to become picture brides to marry strangers in Hawaii. They're going to have a very bumpy ride. A very, very bumpy journey, but perhaps they can find a way to find a new life away from their home country and away from Japanese occupation.
So that's what we mean by a picture bride. I was kind of a little bit scratching my head.
I'll make it clear a little bit later. Okay, so don't worry your pretty little head about it right now, Peter.
All right. And the Korean title is definitely not a literal translation because we heard the Aloha, and that's because the story is set in Hawaii.
Yes, and it's My Three Mothers. Or not 나의 엄마들, isn't it? My mothers. But there are three mothers in particular we're talking about.
Interesting. Have we heard from this author before?
We've not. It's the very first of her books to be translated into English, but she is very well known here. So Lee Geum-yi was born in 1962 in Chungcheongbuk-do province. She was heavily influenced by her grandmother and her grandmother's bedtime stories. That was her inspiration to become a writer. And she made her debut in 1984. She won the Sebut Literary Contest Prize for a children's story. And then she started writing for children. And then into the 90s and the early 2000s, she started writing young adult fiction. And she's become really, really well known in Korea because she's not afraid to address difficult topics that affect teenagers and young people.
Great.
And she's prolific. She's had more than 50 books published in Korean. They've been translated into Russian, into Japanese, into Vietnamese, into Chinese, and into French. She was nominated for the Hans Christian Andersen Award in 2020, which is a big children's literature prize.
Very recently as well nominated.
Yes, and so it's amazing that finally, thanks to An Seon Jae, who we have featured on the show before, we've got her first English translation.
Great. Looking forward to diving into this. An Seon Jae we've heard from before. You've talked about him, and I always remember him because he's a brother, Anthony.
He is brother Anthony of Taizé. His Korean name is An Seon Jae. He's been here since the 70s, and he's published many, many translations, usually poetry. However, earlier in the autumn, we featured Broken Summer by J.M. Lee, that fascinating thriller about what happened in the past amongst the young teenagers.
Yes.
And so we have a second novel from him today. He's an incredible human being. He was born in the UK in 1942, studied at Oxford, then joined this Taizé community, this monastic community, and came to Korea. He taught at Sogang University for 3 decades. He's won numerous awards for his translations. His translations are not flashy, they're not fancy, but they're very, very good. He takes his time, and I think over the years, through his experience in Korea, he manages to capture the certain style, certainly of poetry, whether you look at Gusang or Chunsangbyeong or Shinkyung-nim. And I think he's brilliant. I have a lot of respect. And I'd like to thank him because he sent me a copy of this book.
Oh.
So I was able to read it and review it thanks to him.
That's lovely, isn't it? He's a member of the British Empire as well. Fabulous, getting recognition and Korea's Jade Crown Award of Merit for services to Korean literature.
Yes.
He's got a brilliant CV. Okay, we're going to start at the beginning of this tale?
No, we're not.
Oh.
No, we're going to start with the three women we're going to follow en route. They're in Japan, in Kobe City, and they're waiting to get the permission and get the boat to Hawaii.
All right, let's take it away.
In addition to the women at the inn who were going to Hawaii to be married, there were a number of others who wanted to go to the United States for other reasons. Among them, there was a woman named Esther Kim, who had graduated from the Ihwa Hakdang. Esther said she was on her way to study in the United States, but she had waited a long time due to passport problems. The girls who were on their way to be married learned English from Esther. She said that they ought to know at least some simple English in order to pass the immigration test in Hawaii. They started with A, B, C, D. Soon, Willow was able to read the English alphabet used in her passport and travel documents haltingly. She didn't know what the words meant, but it was a new world opening before her. Esther told them, in English, you call women getting married like you picture brides. Picture bride. Picture bride. Willow repeated the words to herself. Esther was fond of Willow, who studied hardest among the picture brides. Once, when they happened to be alone together, Willow asked Esther, "Why do you have that name? It's the first time I've ever come across a name like that. And my given name is Buturi. Hold on. I was born after 2 older brothers died. I hated the name that my harabaji chose for me, meaning I was to hold on firmly to a younger brother when he was born. The name was not for me, but for a younger brother, who still hasn't been born. Then, who gave you the name Esther? I chose it when I was baptized in the church. Esther is a queen who saved her countrymen. I'm going to America to study and save our compatriots." Fascinated, Willow gazed at her friend, who was so dignified and self-confident. To Willow, Esther choosing her own name was more remarkable than saying she would save her countrymen. Some of the girls in Ojin village were also given names meaning they should look after their younger brothers, or that they were unwanted daughters. Names like Sopsopi, Suni, Tosobi expressed sorrow at having a girl, while Kutsuni, Maksuni, Malsuni, and Yomjon were expressions of hope that there would be no more girls born. There were also children, usually girls, without any name. Willow was given her name because she was born when the pussy willows were blooming, and she had never thought that her name was any better than the names of other girls. The names of sons were often composed following ancestral tradition of the wishes of the family or parent, but the name Willow did not contain any expectations. Perhaps because a daughter was destined to leave home and become a stranger on marrying. Nothing was expected of her from childhood. If that were the case, why did her father make her sit at the back of the room behind the boys and learn the 1,000-character classic, and later send her to school? With such questions remaining in her heart, Willow longed to choose a dreamed-of life, and a proper name for herself like Esther. She decided that once she was in Hawaii, she would study hard and do so.
Welcome to Arirang Radio.
If you are in Jeju,
88.7 in Jeju City,
88.1 in Seogwipo City,
101.9 in the Daejeong area.
Arirang Radio.
That was Hwang Chi-yeol with 어찌 잊어 How Can I Forget You? And some of you getting in touch. Marilyn from New Zealand saying, picture brides. My dad and uncles actually had to go through some photos of some Chinese potential picture brides and choose one. And actually, they didn't. And my grandfather was not happy about that. He was trying to line them up. It's a different time, isn't it?
I mean, we're talking about this book is set in the 1910s.
Oh, wow.
So this is when it happened in real life. And yes, so for those who don't know, it seems like Marilyn is well informed. She's got it spot on. Mm-hmm. Picture brides, basically, men and women would send off photos to these brokers with a little bit of information.
Okay.
And then you would pick the right one, or someone would be picked for you, and then without ever meeting, sometimes without even corresponding, you would travel to them and be legally married, and that was it. You were now husband and wife.
So this was done almost exclusively, I'm assuming, with like international marriages where people were looking to leave one country and head towards another kind of thing.
Because in Korea, there were many arranged marriages, but there it would be from someone from the next village or the next town over, so it wasn't necessary because, well, the matchmaker had already met them or your parents could go and see them.
Wow.
So this was very, very different, and it's why this is a fascinating story.
Yeah, and there must have been only a small window of time where this could have occurred because you've got to have the technology to have pictures for them to be picture brides. Before that, I'm guessing maybe it's just done domestically. You wouldn't be shipped abroad, of course.
We'll talk about this more as we get to the end of the story and talk about the history and why it occurred.
Okay, so Willow seems like one of the main characters. One of the mums is Willow.
She is one of the three women we're going to follow. Esther is not. Esther is just this chance encounter, but she gives them this vital information.
Okay, and then she's quite fond of Willow.
Yes, because Willow, she wants to make this work. She has hope. Willow, her father was a yangban, was sort of a quite noble person, but he died fighting the Japanese during the start of the occupation.
Okay.
So she's lost her father and she thinks, well, maybe this new life in Hawaii with a Korean man I've never met could be the way out for me. Yes. So these picture brides from Korea are marrying Korean men.
All of them. Okay.
Yes. Then we have Hongju. She's a widow, a very young widow, same age as Willow, whose husband died just a couple of weeks after they were wed.
Oh, no.
And so she's considered to be unlucky, so she's like, I'm getting out of the country. She's an old friend, a childhood friend of Willow. Mm-hmm. And then we have Songhwa, who's the granddaughter of a shaman.
Oh.
The thing is, if you're the granddaughter of a shaman, that means either you become a shaman or you get sold off to be a giseng. You're the lowest of the low in terms of marriageability. Okay. So this is a chance for her as well to leave the country. Mm-hmm. And also, this is Japanese-occupied Korea. It's not a hopeful country at this point in time. The peninsula was in a lot of pain. So maybe these strangers are going to bring them happiness as husbands.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. So Willow, all she's got is this formal marriage offer and the money to get there. Hongju has been corresponding with her husband, and it seems like there's some connection there and they're really happy.
That's nice.
Songhwa can't read or write, so there's no communication at all.
Okay.
And they travel. They go to Japan first, and they spend some time there. Then they get off on this 2-week journey by boat to the middle of the Pacific. And they arrive, and they get to immigration, and they are collected by their husbands one by one. Thing is, it's not as romantic as it may sound, because some of these pictures, some of these photos were not exactly accurate.
Oh, dear.
A lot of the men are a lot older than they claim to be, including Hongju and Songhwa's husbands.
It's too late to turn back, though, isn't it?
Exactly. And Willow waits till the evening. Finally, So Tae-wan, her partner, comes to collect her, and he is stone cold.
Oh, no.
He's just all business, no happiness, no nothing, doesn't even want to talk to her.
Oh,
and he
dear.
seems to be of a higher status than all these other men.
Okay.
And they go to an inn where the brides and grooms are staying before the group wedding the next day.
Oh, there's a group wedding?
Yes, at the local church. Their room, Willow's room, is the only one with a proper bed.
Oh.
And her friends are there too, and they're upset that they've been lied to, they've been tricked. The innkeeper says, look, you're not the first ladies. This happens all the time. We get a lot of crying brides here, but you're legally married now. You got to stay. So the marriage ceremony takes place. Willow is taken to the plantation where Tae-wan, as a supervisor, and his extended family live.
Okay.
And there, after meeting the family, she overhears a conversation that becomes clear why he has been so cold to her.
Oh, what is it?
Nobody told him he was getting married until 3 days before she arrived.
He didn't know?
His father, who's very sick, has had a stroke, has arranged this marriage.
Wow.
And it seems like there was a previous woman he loved and he lost, called Daddy or something like that.
Well, that makes it explainable.
Yes, so Willow is like, oh goodness. But she settles down. She's married now, legally speaking. She becomes the devoted daughter-in-law. She looks after the sick father, does all the household chores. She's pretty much ignored by Taewon. Okay. Luckily, the other women around help her find what she needs to do and how to live in a new country. But then there's this moment they go to visit Taewon's mother's grave and the truth comes out.
Intriguing. Here's our second reading.
After hurriedly filling the basket, she followed after Taewon, then abruptly stopped. Taewon was sitting, not in the shade of a tree, but in front of another grave. Instead of his normal hard expression that never seemed to vary, he stared blank-faced. Willow approached, her heart trembling. Taewon seemed unaware that she was there as he stared vacantly at the gravestone, and after seeing the name on the stone, Willow froze for a moment, then collapsed beside Taewon. Dal-hee Che, 1892 to 1911. It was Dal-hee, not Daddy, and she was already dead. Taewon, noticing Willow, silently raised the bottle to his lips. She felt more hopeless than when she thought Dal-hee was alive. A dead woman, still buried in a man's breast, would never be forgotten until the day he died. Tears flowed from Willow's eyes. "What's wrong?" Taewon asked, surprised by her emotions. At that, she burst into a storm of weeping like a dam collapsing. "I know who this person is. I know everything." Willow pointed at the stone, speaking in a voice mixed with tears. Taewon's expression wavered. "We should be going." He threw the empty bottle into the grass and stood up. However, instead of following Taewon's words, Willow poured out all that she had kept locked in her inmost heart. "I know you said you wouldn't marry me because Dal-hee is in your heart. And even once we were wed, it's because of her that you've never considered me any better than livestock. I told myself I should believe that it would get better in the years to come, that I should wait. But now I see that those were false hopes. She is the only person in your heart, isn't she? But what about me? Is there no room for me?" Taewon, who was plainly embarrassed, hesitated, then sat down again. "Who told you all that?" "First, the matchmaker said you were a landowner, and that if I came here I would be able to go to school. I admit that if I had disliked the look of you, I wouldn't have come, but after never having left our village, I left my family and crossed the sea in order to get here. Even if I couldn't study or live in luxury, even if you weren't a landowner, that would not have mattered. If we were a true couple, all I wanted was for us to live together, caring for each other, helping each other. But you can't give me as much as a fingernail's space. So what is to become of me? Tell me, have you ever once thought of me as your beloved wife?" The more she talked, the more she wept, until she was sitting with both legs out, sobbing. She cried like a child, tearing up clumps of grass and throwing them. Taewon bowed his increasingly flushed face and said nothing. Having revealed all her worries and fears, Willow felt relieved in a way she hadn't since she arrived, and even ventured to think that she didn't care if Taewon disliked her more than ever. After kicking at her hem and blowing her nose, she asked one last cutting question. "If you feel so different, why did you pick me up at the immigration service instead of letting them send me back? Why did you go through with the ceremony and bring me home with you? To make your food? And use my body?"
Wow, she's really letting her emotions come out, show him how she feels. Does this change things? Does he, like, I don't know, open up his heart?
He does.
Oh.
This is the first time he stops to think of her and actually understand what she's going through. And he tells her what happened. He tells her how Dal-hee died.
What did happen?
Well, he blames himself for her suicide.
Oh, no.
She was working at the plantation with him. They came over on the same boat together as teenagers. And his brother lost his life saving Dal-hee in an accident at the plantation.
Oh, dear.
And his mother already hated Dal-hee. But after his brother's death, she hated her even more.
No.
And that drove Dal-hee to kill herself. And then the next year, his mother died.
Oh,
so in
dear.
3 years, he lost 3 of the closest people to him.
That's awful.
But as they confess to each other, it allows them to open up to each other, and they make a promise to do better as a husband and wife and to move forward into the future. And this cathartic moment is the thing that starts their relationship going. They start to behave like a real couple. They start to chat, they laugh, they live together.
It's a turning point. That's great.
Exactly. Willow gets a letter from Hongju, her friend, who's overworked. She's 4 months pregnant. She hates her life in Hawaii. She wants to see her in Songhwa. And Willow wonders about Songhwa. She hears disturbing news from the women who come back from church. Rushes to see her with Taewon, only to find her emaciated and covered in bruises. She's been beaten half to death by her husband. And so Willow takes her back to live with them, away from her horrific life.
Oh, that's okay to do?
Yeah, because her husband's the supervisor, whereas Songhwa's husband is just a lowly laborer.
Okay.
And then Willow discovers that she herself is pregnant.
Oh.
And Songhwa, being the granddaughter of a shaman, has the magic touch and helps her through and, guides her through her pregnancy.
Lovely.
As for the baby, just before it's born, Taewon's father passes away.
Oh, no.
And unlike in Korea, where the mourning period is weeks, months, years in the Joseon dynasty, here in Hawaii, life has to go on.
Okay.
And Willow gives birth. It's a healthy baby boy. His Korean name is Jongho. His Hawaiian name, his American name is David. And 3 months later, she and Taewon and their son moved to Honolulu for a new start in life.
Oh, this sounds positive.
Yes, Taewon is passionate about freeing Korea from the Japanese, and he's going to work for the Independence League, this group of Koreans fighting for freedom. And he sets up his own shoe store as well.
Okay.
And they get used to life in the big city. And Willow bumps into Hongju, who's there for a visit, and they go to see Songhwa, and for the first time the three of them are reunited. But things don't work out as well as we might hope.
Oh, no.
Life's hard. Willow and Taewon don't have enough money. Their Japanese neighbors are nasty. And thanks to a friend, she gets a well-paying job doing laundry at a mansion. But then the children of the owners turn out to be really cruel and throw stones at Jongho when he's hurt.
Oh.
She blames the kids, and the owners who had treated her kindly give her the sack.
Oh.
And she ends up actually working at the inn where she spent her first night in Korea. It's the first night in Hawaii, excuse me.
Full circle.
Yeah. And then, with this struggle for independence, there's fighting in between the Koreans. There are two opposing groups. They're both against the
Hawaii?
Japanese, yes.
Okay.
But they're both fighting each other, and it even leads to Taewon being taken to hospital after being injured. And he's more passionate than ever. He's saying, I want to go to China. I want to fight to help set up a new Korean government outside of Korea. Willow, she has no choice. He goes off. She and Jongho move to a plantation nearer to Hongju so they can spend time together. But then the divisions between these two groups of independence fighters are apparent here among the Korean immigrant community. And they actually push Willow and Hongju apart.
Oh, no.
Until they're brought back together by a savage betrayal.
Wow, look at all this unfolding, all those miles away in Hawaii.
One day, Willow was so busy sewing that she didn't realize that someone had come into the store until a shadow fell across the workbench. Willow raised her head, startled, as if she'd seen a ghost. Hongju stood there, holding a big bag, looking like nothing but skin and bones. It was the first time she had seen her since their fight a few months before. She looked around, but Hongju was alone. Willow's heart sank at the sight of her oldest friend in this condition. What's happened? What are you doing here at this time of day? Come in, sit down. Willow hastily stood up and pulled Hongju toward the chair. Hongju let herself be led like a phantom. Willow poured a cup of water with trembling hands. Hongju even seemed to have difficulty taking the cup. Willow eyed her as she cautiously asked, "Have you run away?" "It's not me who ran away. It's Jo Dok-sam." Hongju laughed as if she were deranged. "What? Where? What about Songgil?" Hongju sighed. "He's gone off to Korea, taking Songgil. He asked me to go too, but I didn't go." "On a visit?" It would have been nice to see your family. Why didn't you go? Going back to her family home and presenting a husband and children was a dream of Willow's from the moment she decided to get married as a picture bride. Not a visit. He's gone for good. And if I went back to Korea, I'd have to live as a concubine. Willow abruptly sat down in front of the sewing machine. Hongju talked on about how Deok-sam had not been a widower after all. His wife was alive in Korea, raising their children and taking care of his parents. Deok-sam, who only had 5 daughters, had decided to arrange a picture marriage in order to have a son before he was any older. And now that he had a son, he had decided to go back and buy land with the money he had saved while pretending to be a miser. The wily man made a lot of money lending it out with interest here and there without my knowledge. Hongju did not want to return home as a concubine when she had left as a widow. Deok-sam had said that Hongju, who had given him a son, was his favorite spouse and that once back home, he would divorce his wife. But she didn't believe him. Above all, Hongju had never loved Deok-sam very much, if at all. What wicked people there are in the world. You did well not to go, but how will you live without Song-gil? Willow's voice, which had been strong, dropped at the mention of the child. Even without listening to her reply, Hongju was looking half dead. It's been 5 days since I last saw him. And I'm not dead yet, Hongju muttered, barely moving her dry lips. Willow, I'm sorry. I had nowhere else I could go. Don't be so silly, dear. Of course you had to come to me. You did well to come. Willow kept talking as she led Hongju inside.
Oh dear, that is a terrible twist in the tale, isn't it? So what happens? Is this the end?
No.
No?
No.
Goes on.
You got to read the book.
Okay.
You got to read the book if you want to find out this story is not over by far. Wow. There's more to learn about the struggles of these 3 women who found friendship as picture brides. And I think if you do go on to read the whole book, you're going to be really satisfied by how it turns out, how it resolves itself. It's an epic tale of lives lived in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar men and unknown futures.
Not based on like true stories of these individual women, but there were people like this, a considerable amount of people.
Yeah, there were. Between 1910 and 1924, something like 600 to 1,000 Korean women were picture brides. They went to Hawaii to marry men they'd never met. And these were men who'd come to Hawaii between 1903 and 1905. They were working on sugarcane plantations. Around 7,500 of them went. They were generally a lot older than the brides, and they'd lived hard lives as physical laborers. And there was a fair amount of trickery and deception when it came to using old photos or touching things up. And many women were shocked, like in this story. But of course, they had no money to go home. It's a brilliant book.
We've got some pictures.
Yes.
Like, these are some real pictures of picture brides.
Exactly. So this scene of 3 women, there's a very similar picture like this taken in the book.
Wow.
Maybe perhaps inspired by this picture. So there you see these young women who have no idea what they're getting themselves into.
That's so strange to think about in this day and age where you can communicate so easily.
Exactly.
Back then, that was not possible.
Yeah, and here we have another group of women. And, you know, this is a brilliant tribute to their lives. I would say, if you're going to read this book, make sure you also read Kim Young-ha's Black Flower, which we already featured on the show, because that has Koreans emigrating to Mexico in a much worse situation, where they're forced basically into slave labor. Life in Hawaii was a lot better, but it was still rough. It's a great book. It's a great tribute to those first Korean immigrants coming to America to find a new life.
It was a really interesting tale. Yeah, a bit heartbreaking where we left it, but do read the rest if you want to find out what happens. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming in and reading that for us.
Thank you. And thank you, as always, to the Literature Translation Institute of Korea for the help with copyright permission for this broadcast. Thank you to Lee Geum-yi for her excellent book, to An Seon Jae for his excellent translation. I'll be back next week with another book. It will be the brand new published translation, Saha, S-A-H-A, by Cho Nam-ju, translated by Jamie Chang. So get it while it's hot and read along for next week.
Looking forward to it. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you then.
Goodbye.
You can listen to Check It Out with Paul Matthews on Arirang Radio's #DailyK every Wednesday from 10 a.m. KST.